Ladies and gentlemen, my not to steal from David Letterman, but my next guest, well, he probably does need an introduction, come to think of it, because most people out there probably have no idea who you are. This is Jared Kalfus, and Jared is the president of Black Book. And for most people, that won't mean anything. But for those of us in the car industry, that means everything in the world. Jared, could you, well, first of all, welcome, okay, to our show, Auto Insiders. And could you just give a brief overview, if that's even possible, when it comes to what the hell Black Book is and why it's important to the industry?
I will do my best and thrilled to be here. Thanks for asking me
Well,
to join,
thank
Ray. I
you.
appreciate it. So Black Book today, we'll start with today, but Black Book today is one of the larger leading brands in the automotive industry. And we focus on all kinds of automotive related data and analytics. And we're one of the largest automotive data and analytics companies. We have been around since
Wow.
1955 when Black Book was started. It was started by two gentlemen in Gainesville, Georgia, which is about 90 minutes, give or take, northeast of Atlanta. And they were wholesalers. And they were going auction to auction to auction. And they were doing pretty
Hmm.
well, arbitraging, buying a car in one market and reselling it in another. And one of them got the bright idea that said, gosh, we could write this down, kind of our secret sauce, if you will. And that started and that created the Black Book. And Black Book started, like I said, in the 50s. And people trusted them enough that they started to purchase this book, which was where we valued
Hmm.
vehicles. And it's a long history that I'm happy to share, but that was the start of it, was 1955. And today we've grown into much more than just valuations. We're a full-fledged data
Now,
company.
let me ask you a silly question. You're much too young to have been riding around with either one of those gentlemen back in the 50s. When did you join Black Book?
I joined Black Book in
Okay.
2012. So I've been here about 11 and a half years.
And and
And
what was your
we're
initial position at Black Book?
so at the time, Black Book had three different sales verticals, and I was the director of sales for what we refer to as the automotive licensing channel. And the automotive licensing channel essentially licenses all kinds of Black Book
Hmm.
data to folks that are any combination of vendors to the space. So think about your CRMs, your DMS, your inventory management systems, your equity mining tools, your Reynolds, your CDK, your V Autos of the world. In addition to
Hmm.
dealers, directly, so medium and large size dealer groups, the AutoNations of the world, the Lithias of the world, that can ingest that data directly. Insurance companies, state, local, federal government, rental car companies, fleet management companies, things like that. So it's a giant bucket of non-lender. So no banks, no credit unions, no finance companies, anything that's automotive
Now, just out of curiosity, um, when Zach and I came along, um, I don't think that you were at that point selling your information to, well, we like to believe in ourselves as being a consumer advocacy group. Were we like the first that type of organization that you said, hell, these guys, they're trying to do good. Maybe we should. Well, let's see if their check
related.
doesn't bounce.
Yeah, yeah. So the approach that I take is you have to bet on
Hmm.
it. And my job as president today. We'll fast forward to president, but my job as president today, I think that the most important priority is for me to protect the
Sure.
company and protect the brand. But second is to grow the
Yes.
business. And so we don't know who the next V Auto is going to be. We don't know who the next Reynolds or Reynolds is going to be. So we do our best to try to bet on a lot. But from a consumer advocate standpoint, you are in the 68 years of Black Book. You absolutely have the distinction of being the
Wow.
first. Yes.
Now, not to toot our horn, or for you to toot our horn, but what was it about my son? Because I believe that's who you were having the conversations with. What was
Yeah.
it about
Yes.
my son that Zach um, that made you go? I think I'd like to take a bet on these guys.
Well, that's exactly what it was. I'm a capitalist at heart. I'm an entrepreneur at
Okay.
heart. And I absolutely am swayed and motivated and whatever adjective and verb you want to use to combine there about people that are entrepreneurs and capitalists. And Zach had an
Hmm.
idea. He had a vision. And by the way, not everyone is built like that. Some people are
Hmm.
operators, right? Some people are soldiers. Some people are this. Zach is an entrepreneur, and he had a vision and he had an idea. And in 5 minutes, his elevator pitch captivated me. This is what I want to do. I'm only on day 3 or 4, Jared. Like literally, I think that's
Yeah.
what he said. I mean, our first couple of months, but this is where I'm going, and I knew I wanted to be a part of that, and that ecosystem. Even if it didn't
Hmm.
work out, it was something that I wanted to be attached and associated with.
I appreciate you saying what you're saying about Zach, and and the reason I appreciate it is
Do you agree, Dad? By the way,
I agree. He's a, as I've told him, people think of me as being a pretty good salesperson. That
yeah,
I was pretty good at my craft, and I have said to Zach that I pale in comparison to him when it comes to selling. I actually
yeah,
had an automobile to sell. Okay. I had something tangible for the customer to say yes to. He,
right,
he has a vision. Okay.
yeah,
And a passion for that vision. And he has an, this really unique ability to be able to share that vision and that passion and communicate it in such a way that people just want to get on board. If I can share a quick story about him, I remember when our first winter we went out to Las Vegas because, well, Dad said, why do I have to stay where it's cold? And so we went to Vegas, and I remember, I'd be sitting on the sofa and he'd be on a Zoom call with somebody, a potential investor. Okay.
right,
And he would go through his pitch. And literally one time he went, and I could hear the whole thing. And, he's not pitching to people that don't have a little bit of money. They got a lot of bit of money.
yeah,
And
yeah. They
yeah.
got a lot
And
of
at the end of this pitch, the guy said, "Can I send you $1 million check right now?" And it was like,
It's amazing.
my goodness, I I couldn't get a
Yeah,
million dollars out of 100,000 people, at
right,
$10 a throw or whatever it is. He had a guy after
yeah,
30 minutes wanted to write him a check for $1 million.
yeah. And that's what I'm attracted to, those kind of people. That can sell an idea, and that's what
Yeah.
Zach sold, and that's what founders do, right? Successful founders, they have to sell themselves, and then they have to sell an idea and a
Yes.
vision. And he sold me, and obviously he sold a lot more people than me, because you guys are doing
Well,
tremendous.
we have found some traction and a little bit of success. I mean, I don't know if he's sharing this with the government and tax returns, but I do believe the business is actually making a few bucks, um, but not a lot of bucks.
Right.
But it's actually turning the corner and making some type of profit on a monthly basis. I'm guessing, Jared, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm guessing when you grew up and you graduated high school and your parents said to you, Jared, you're going to go off to college, aren't you? And you said, oh, of course, mom and dad. Um, and they said, well, what do you want to be when you're done going to college? I'm guessing you didn't say to them, well, I hope one day to run one of the largest data outfits in America.
Well, I'll go one higher than that. I'm not sure that anyone, um, unless their parents own a dealership or mom or dad is in the car business
Mm-hmm.
themselves, says I want to go into the car business. This was this the
Yes.
automotive business. I grew up in the suburbs of Atlanta. I was raised in the suburbs of Atlanta, and I had no knowledge. I had no interaction. I had no
Yeah.
nothing. I would have sooner have been a basketball player than and I'm barely 5'10", by the way, than to end up in here. So yeah, I. I went to college in the University of South
Okay.
Florida, in Tampa. I was growing up. I was the kid that wanted to be a sportscaster,
Okay.
and I would sit in my room with either the radio turned down or the TV turned down with an old tape recorder, and I would broadcast
Wow.
games. And that's all I wanted to do. And I wanted to be Howard Cosell and Al Michaels and Bob Costas and all those folks that I grew up with. And I had this interest in, I knew every local TV meteorologist and sportscaster and radio DJ, and broadcasting it's all I ever wanted to do. And so that I went to school to study
Okay.
that. And I dove in. I did really well with it. And as most people figure out, I graduated college with some school loans, and I wasn't raised. I was raised middle class and took loans to go
Sure.
to school and had to pay them back. And at that time in the mid '90s when I graduated, it was like $5 an hour. It was the starting pay for a low junior assistant to an assistant to an assistant, and I couldn't do it. I had to move home, and I had to figure out how to pay for these school loans back. So that was the end of my broadcasting aspirations.
I bet you would have been really good at it, though.
I was decent. Yes, certainly I'm not shy. I'm an extrovert. I feel like in some cases I got a pretty good grasp of communication
Mm-hmm.
skills and writing and verbal and that kind of stuff. Um, and I do use that, by the way. That's one of the things that I still use today. So my broadcast, my mass communications and broadcast degree, do help me in that today. But it certainly didn't help in the car business on day one.
I know when I used to have applicants come in and talk to me, and they were like recent college graduates, and they said, they thought they'd wanted to sell cars. And I used to look at them and I said, do you think that when your parents sent you off to college 4 years ago, that they were hoping when you graduated that you would come home and you'd go, guess what, mom and dad? I got a job selling cars. That is not the career path your folks had in mind for you when they sent you off to school.
Yes, that's right. Now, I didn't start in a car
Okay.
dealership. Uh, so my career, after applying for a million jobs over the span of many, many months in 1995, um, I caught on. I sold somebody well enough at Enterprise Rent a
Okay.
Car, which at the time, and I think it's still true today, they are the number one employer of recent college
Yes.
graduates. And they have, which I credit today, they have an amazing management trainee rotational program that I feel fortunate enough to have caught on to in 1995. And I started at the
Mm-hmm.
bottom, making no money, vacuuming and washing cars. And it's very much a pyramid there. You have to learn the business, and you have to outwit and outplay everybody else who's trying to get up the pyramid. And a lot of it has to do with
Mm-hmm.
sales. Certainly, you have to understand the business, you have to learn the business. But what separates you, the equalizer, is can you sell? And a lot of what you're selling there is, at least in the beginning, is you're selling additional supplemental
Mm-hmm.
insurance for the rental car insurance to people that more than likely have the insurance. So you have to. It's not an easy sell. But that's where I started. So I started Enterprise Rent a Car in the mid '90s back here in Atlanta, and I bought what they were selling. They were selling the
Mm-hmm.
pyramid, and they said, you can run one of these branches in a year. You can be an area manager in X number of years. You can do this. You can do this, and they sold me all the way up to you can do this. And they pointed at people that had done that. And I said, gosh, Jared, with my drive and my determination, I'm kind of an old school spirit where, I believe what people tell me. And I also believe if you tell me it can happen, I will make it happen. And I'm extremely loyal with regards to the company I keep and the company I work with. And I had planned to stay there for 30 years. I was going to show them that not only was I going to get there, I was going to get there quicker than anybody
Mm.
ever had. And I did. I did. So I figured out how to sell, and I became this record salesperson there. I figured out how to run the branch, and I became a branch manager quicker than anybody ever had in the Atlanta area. And I did all of these things, and they noticed me. And the gentleman that was in charge of all of the Atlanta stuff at the time, they called him the vice president and general manager. He took notice of me, and a couple of the other people below him took notice of me. And he took a liking to me after a couple of years of me managing branches. And I did that during Atlanta had the Olympics in '96, and that was a
Mm-hmm.
zoo, and I learned a lot about this and that. And he took a liking to me and said, well, how I got my job was I went into what they refer to as fleet management. And fleet management was pure sales. So they took you out of the branch, they put you in the local corporate office, and you were literally cold calling, trying to lease kind of company cars and lease cargo vans to plumbers and to air conditioner companies and anybody that would need a company vehicle. And I said, I'm your
Mm-hmm.
guy. And I just dove into sales on that side of the business. And I learned that side of the business. And then they moved me over to remarketing the vehicles. So all these cars that, Enterprise would buy cars, they would rent them for 18 to 24 months. And then they'd have to sell
Mm-hmm.
the cars at the end of the 18 to 24 months. They called it remarketing. And I learned the remarketing side of the business, selling 500 rental cars at a time to local dealers. And, I've got 500 white Ford Tauruses. Who wants them? And we go knock door to door and do this and do that. So I learned every piece of business about the what I'll call fleet management, and made a name for myself there in about 3.5, 4 years that I was there.
Wow. Now, what got you into Black Book into and to switch from rental cars and fleet management and
Yeah.
remarketing and learning
Yep.
the whole inside and out of the rental business. What
So
got you to
I
Black
had a
Book?
couple of stops. Yeah, I had a couple of stops between Black Book and here, between Enterprise and
Hmm.
here. And I'll tell you, I'll go through them very, very quickly because I wouldn't have had the opportunity to join Black Book if I didn't have those kind of on my
Hmm.
resume. So I left Enterprise in 1999, and that was the dawn of the
Yes,
.com era. Everybody was, .com, .com, .com. And there was a company at the time called
I remember
carsdirect.com.
them.
Called They're still
Yes.
around today. They're now underneath an umbrella that's called Internet Brands. And Cars Direct was going to figure out how to sell cars online. Again, .com. And they were looking for someone that had my exact background, that understood how to negotiate and acquire vehicles, because they were going to act like a broker, if you will. And they needed to know how to buy cars, how to sell cars, this and that. And uh, they found me, and they flew me to LA where they were headquartered, and I got hired. And the funny thing is, they hired, I think, 9 of us at the same time, different parts of the country, and all 9 had Enterprise in their
Wow.
background. And so they knew what they were looking for.
Jared, if I'm
Uh,
not mistaken, I think the Penske organization was involved with Cars
you are
Direct.
right.
Yeah.
You are right. So Cars Direct at the time raised more money than anybody than any VC. VC had invested. There's about $300 million
Wow.
in 1999. Like they had enough money to figure it out, right? They had 300 million in
Wow.
'99. Okay, that was a lot of money. And Penske, at the time, it wasn't Penske; it was United Auto
Exactly.
Group, which
Yes.
was run by Penske. He had invested part of that large swath. Well, I don't know how much he did, but he was part of that $300 million. So now I had a chance to learn e-commerce and online advertising. Cars Direct, essentially, you had Auto Trader on the used car side. Cars Direct was on the new car
Hmm.
side. So now I figured out, I learned how to do e-commerce, and they eventually went into the pre-owned ad listings. They went into subprime leads and everything else. But I had an education like nobody else, and 7 years there, from '99 to '06. And I learned the e-commerce sites. Now I had the fleet management, I had the rental car, I had remarketing, I had e-commerce. And then I went in '06, and I learned the wholesale side of the
Okay.
business. And I went to Manheim, and the largest remarketer in the world. And that was, again, here in Atlanta. And at the time, Manheim was launching a new product called Point. And Point was an inventory management system, just like the V-Autos of
Hmm.
today. Manheim had a great idea. A great idea. We're going to create this inventory management system that's going to tell dealers what they should stock on their lot. There's 100 parking spaces on your lot. This is the right 100 cars. Get rid of these two. And by the way, through Manheim channels, go acquire two backfill. Right? It was very, very self-serving, and it was one of the very first ones that was out there. And that was my first job at Manheim. And what we found out very quickly is Manheim was a much better remarketing auction company than they were a software company. It never
Okay.
worked. But they liked Jared. They saw something in me, and they allowed me to stay. And I learned the remarketing side of the business, and I moved up through Manheim. And ultimately, several years later, I was running dealer sales for the Western United States for Manheim. Basically, everything from the Mississippi River to
Wow.
California. It was a big job that I was very, very proud of. And I stayed there for about 6 years or so. And I learned the remarketing side of the business and the auction side of the business. And that's when I ended up at Black Book. And that was almost 12 years ago. So now I know the remarketing, the auction, the e-commerce. I knew the vendors. I knew rental car. I knew fleet management. And if I didn't have that wide breadth of background, I would not have been prepared, and more than likely, I would not have been hired to start it back
Do
at Black
you
Book.
think that your play-by-play background, um, which requires you to process what you're seeing quickly and process data in a sense quickly, do you think that that play-by-play background um, plays a role in how you ended up being the head of one of the largest data mining concerns in America?
I think that I'm not sure that I'm going to give that all the credit, but here's what I will tell you. I think that a large portion of success is communication
Hmm.
skills, being able to tell a story, right, that others can relate to. So whether it's in sales or in Zach's case to invest
Hmm.
money, to sit in front of a customer, to sit in front of a manufacturer, to sit in front of you, right? To sit on a panel, to be able to sell and tell the story of yourself and your organization. Those communication skills, I think, are invaluable. And does my journalism slash broadcasting amateur skills help that? I think it can help anyone. Yes.
And I would agree with that because part of my background that nobody knows about is I had dropped out of college. It seems to run in the family. Although I shouldn't say that because my father, he was a dentist, so obviously there was one person in the family that could stick to it. Um, And eventually, after I dropped out of college, I ended up attending the Charles Morris Price School of Advertising and Journalism, sponsored by the Poor Richards Club of Philadelphia. It was the school with the world's longest name, but
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
it was a 1 year school where we took 30 courses in 1 year, 15 each
Mm,
semester, and each one of the courses was taught by some professional who worked in that field, not not a
gotcha.
professional professor, but
Yeah,
um we had the public relations side. We had people that ran successful public relations firms in Philadelphia,
right,
and
right.
I think, having done that for a year,
Yep,
that caused me to look at things differently when I
right.
would try to figure out how to move product or how to sell things. Um, because you have to learn. I mean, I remember a friend of mine opened up a moped business in in the early 70s, the mid 70s, whenever it was, and I came up with his advertising for it. It was and what we came up with was mopeds mean mo fun, and it was just, because we wanted to try and create this image
Yeah,
of, this is the funnest thing you're ever going to do.
right, right, right,
Who
right.
knew they'd
Yeah.
probably really work today? Because it didn't work then. But it causes you to think outside of the proverbial box. Do you
Yeah.
find yourself having to do that with what you do, or because you're dealing with data, you really have to stay within a box?
No, I think that's one of the things that, well, I think this is how I describe it. One of the best things that's worked that I can say about working for Black Book is most everyone in the industry knows who
Yes.
Black Book is. It's a very large brand. It's a legacy company. It's been around for 63 years now. And there's not many people industry wise, automotive finance, insurance, dealer, manufacturer, vendor, whomever, that don't
Yeah.
hasn't heard of Black Book. I think that's one of the greatest things most people know. That's also one of the most challenging things, is that people, while they've heard of us, they also feel like they know what we are. Oh, you're just a valuation guide, and they
Hmm.
pigeonhole us, right? We haven't just been a valuation guide for 15 or 20 years, but yet we've got this legacy, anchor around us, that we are, a full-fledged. We don't just say it because we want to be it. We are this full-fledged data analytics company. We do so much more than just value data, than just appraising vehicles. So that actually gives me, that's one of the best parts of the job. I use all these really bad
Hmm.
analogies. Um, um, but when it comes to Black Book, we are the battery. I say we're the battery that powers the
Okay.
toys, right? And so I don't make the DMS, the CRM, the equity mining tool. I don't lend the money that the lenders do. I don't do the risk portfolio. I don't write the total loss from the insurance company. I don't rent the car. But my data powers all those companies. So my data powers car
Hmm.
ads, right? Uh, I'm not a consumer advocate company. You are. And so it's almost impossible. We haven't found a way thus far that you couldn't potentially use our data, right? And I'm just not even amazed anymore when we get a phone call that says, "Hey, I got this new company. We're going to do
Hmm.
this. Do you think you could help?" Yes. And so we're not in a box, I
Okay.
guess, right? So think of it as ingredients. You open up your fridge and you got all these ingredients in the fridge. What can you do with all of this data and analytics? Well, you could do this with it, this with it, this with it. And so I don't get frustrated at all. It's an amazing opportunity because we have so much stuff in our cupboard, in our fridge, that we can help partner and power just about anything that's automotive or automotive finance related.
That's really staggering when you think about it. Because I agree with you. Most people, when they think black book, they think valuations, valuations, and yet you are so much more than that. Um, Now, I would be remiss having you on the show if I don't at least ask for some insights as to what the hell is going on in the automobile industry. Um,
It's a good time to ask, by the way. It's not boring right now, right?
you know what? I've been doing this since 1977, and I haven't really come across a boring time yet.
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
something about this industry that lends itself to anything but boredom. So,
right.
but
Yeah, I can rattle off some things that are that and if you want to dive down any of these holes. I don't claim to be the data and analytics. I manage the business, but I know enough to be dangerous.
well,
But I'm happy to throw some things out.
I think
You know,
our audience would be curious as to what direction you see things going. I mean, because I've been saying for I don't know since the beginning of the year that I think the loss of production during the height of COVID has really impacted pre-owned side of things, and because
yeah.
there's just still a shortage of pre-owned vehicles, and because of that shortage, I don't think things will normalize through the end of I think it'll take through the end of the decade for things to and then I don't even know then because we'll be having that switch over to EVs, and well, that switch over to EVs, how's that going to impact the value of ICE vehicles? It's just a fascinating time to me. um so
Yeah.
I mean, as somebody who dives into this on a daily basis, or at least has a staff that does, um, where do you see it going as far as used car valuations over the next, call it 5-10 years?
So I'll go backwards before we go forwards, just to kind of set the
Okay.
baseline, if you like. Or let's go to February of 2020, the month before the
Yes.
pandemic, right? Um, and then let's quickly jump into March. So in March of 2020, obviously things went nuts, right? And everything shut down, and car sales went down, and supply went down, and microchips went down, and all these things, um, and then we had the big
Yeah.
bounce back in the summer, right? So if we kind of look at that, um, inventory on dealer lots just before the pandemic was about 15 million vehicles. So that's new and
Hmm.
used cars. So it's 15 million vehicles were out there. Um, and the SAR was steady for a bunch of years, and then the world
Yeah.
went nuts, right? Um, if you then fast forward a couple of years to last year, 2022, um, the SAR, we sold about 13.6 million new vehicles in 2022, kind of accelerating now into this year. Uh, we feel like you're going to end up somewhere between about 15.3 to 15.6 on new cars this year. So about 2 million, give or take 1.7, 2 million vehicles
Hmm.
more. And so we're steadily increasing. But one of the reasons that you had so many challenges with the used car market is because you had no new cars being built during the
Yeah.
pandemic, right? And so rental car companies had to go back into the auctions and buy rental cars, but buy used cars that they were going to use in the rental car. That drove prices. It was supply and
Yes.
demand. You still had people that were what's the phrase? Uh, I can't remember the phrase of the people that were, they had to go to work. Nurses and teachers, and I can't remember the phrase that we
Essential
said.
workers. Yeah.
Essential. I can't remember the word. And their car broke down, or they had to have cars, and so they were driving demand. And the manufacturers had the microchip shortage. You may remember that winter. There was a fire at a refinery off the coast in Louisiana that created petroleum. Well, that petroleum helped contribute to foam seats in cars. So there was all these things that were just throwing onto the fire for new cars. That drove supply down of used cars, which drove prices through the roof. When new car production finally did start to come back, that's when you saw the crazy pricing, market value adjustments, 10,000 sticker, that kind of stuff, which you guys, call it good timing or whatever, but you launched your business right around that to help educate consumers, right? All these things going on. Are we back to normal today? We're not. The rental car companies still can't get enough new car inventory to satiate their demand and their need. So we're going to be, the mid 15s, 15.3 to 15.6 next year on new cars. Then you throw a strike into it, UAW strike. Now that still hasn't really affected too much right now. What we think will happen, depending upon how much longer this goes, and we think that Stellantis will probably be the first, is not that the supply is going to be affected, next week or anything, but there's a lot of incentives. Especially Stellantis has the highest incentives that are out there. I think Dodge and Chrysler, all that kind of stuff. Maybe they pull back on some of the incentives that they've got out. But right now, there's enough supply in the pipeline on the new car side that that's that. In 2024, we think that SAR. So this year will end up at 15.3 to 15.6. In 23, we think in 2024 that's going to go to about 15.9. So it's going to grow. It's going to grow just a touch on the new car side.
Can I stop you for 1 second?
Please.
Where's that growth going to come from? Is that going to be fleet sales? Because I don't really see the retail side of things rebounding with high interest rates and average transaction prices where they are.
Yeah, so fleet sales have been contributing mightily and heavily over the past year or so, and will continue to. What we're also going to see, and again, things just keep coming, right? UAW, this and here. We haven't even talked about interest rates yet. So we're seeing two things that are happening, one of which will help continue to spur this. Number one, the terms are growing longer. Okay, 60, 70, 80, 90 months, right? Because the interest rates, I can't afford to get into it. I can't afford the $800 payment. I can only afford a $600 payment. Well, you got to spread that out. But leasing is going to improve, where people will, you're going to see leasing reemerge as an avenue, not because they want to lease. They can't afford not to lease because they can't finance that vehicle because of the interest rates and how more expensive they're getting. So I need to lease the car in order to get that vehicle in my driveway, and then I'll figure it out 3 years and 36,000 miles from now, which may or may not be the right answer. But between fleet sales and leasing, you're also seeing, by the way, cash sales emerge versus finance, especially with more wealthy folks. You know what? I'm not going to pay 12%. I'll just do cash for those that can afford it. So those are things that are emerging and will continue to emerge to help spur and drive. The demand is still high, by the way. By the way, when we say fleet sales, the rental car companies, that's part of it. The construction companies, the housing, all of that commercial, if you will, I'll put that under the commercial umbrella, is a driver.
There was a recent study that Zach and I have mentioned frequently over the past 3 or 4 weeks, and that was a study on the likelihood of people purchasing another car, and what the study found out is that 83% of the respondents said they don't think they could afford to buy a car, which to me says, the part that I hear is 17% of America feels like they can afford to buy a car, and it's as if the manufacturers have decided, well, the hell with the other 83%. We're just going to keep catering to that 17%. And and that's why I have a hard time seeing how sales, other than on the fleet side of things, how sales on the retail side of things are really going to grow when you've so limited who you can actually sell a car to.
Until the behavior changes, and right now the behavior is demand. Demand is
Okay.
high. They're not having trouble selling what they're making. I'm talking about the
Yes.
OE, right? They're not having trouble selling what they're making. They're able to fulfill, right? Until that demand behavior changes, you may be right in your theory, but manufacturers are they're in business to sell cars, and the minute that behavior changes, you'll start to see programs, you'll start to see price cuts, you'll start to see creative financing, you'll start to see leasing, you'll start to see incentives, you'll start to see rebate, you'll start to see all these things, subvented
Mhm.
rates and zero zero, and right. They don't have to discount anything now. There's no toilet paper on the shelf, right? It's still that way until there becomes a saturation point. Um, they can continue
You
to do this.
you you are in a position where you and your organization have conversations with a lot of different players, whether it be used car retailers, whether it be remarketers, whether it be the auctions, whether it be the manufacturers. Um, you were probably privy to information that the rest of us only wished we could get our hands on. But if I hear what you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what I think I'm hearing is that at this point, the communications that you're having indicate that the manufacturers are okay where they're at because there still seems to be more than enough people that are trying to buy up their product. And until they see that change dramatically, they're not going to change what it is that they're doing as far as the percentage of vehicles that they're offering that are at higher trim levels, um, because they're content at the moment to cater to that 17% of the population that finds themselves still in the market.
Yeah, I want to be very careful. No OEM representative has ever told Jared or anybody at Blackwood that I know of that we're
Yeah.
okay. Again, to me, it's just analytics and
Yes.
behavior, right? That we spot in the marketplace. But why did the UAW strike last week on the Kentucky plant at Ford? It's the most profitable plant, SUVs, trucks, right? And um, they want to keep churning those things out,
Yes.
right? All the profit is in the SUVs, all the profits in the trucks, and that's not a
Yeah.
secret,
No.
by the way. And that's where all the margin is, right? And the more you can load those things up, what I see is an opportunity. What I see is an opportunity for some uh, either current manufacturer, maybe there's a new one, I don't know, that comes in to fill the void of that. When I say cheaper, I just mean price, not cheaper as in quality, but that cheaper priced segment. Because yes, right now everybody's loading them up and the margins are high and it's good times. These are the salad days, right? But the demand is there. I think you can still probably make decent money if you're a manufacturer that produces a cheaper priced vehicle. Because to your point, some people are priced out. By the way, that's what's driving the used car
Yes.
market, right? Is, well, I can't buy new, so now I'm going to have to go buy an X number of year old with X number of mile vehicle on it, and that's what's helping to drive the used car market.
Um, do you do you think that if I, my definition of affordable and I could be way off, but I think affordable has to be below $40,000 for the vast majority of people out there, and that if the vehicle price point was under 30, was between 20 and $30,000, that's probably really the sweet spot. And I get why most manufacturers don't want to cater to that market, because the margins are thin compared to the margins on those 80, 90, $100,000 SUVs. I get that. But there aren't, as you know, there aren't enough pre-owned cars out there to satisfy
Yeah.
the needs of the public that's trying to get into affordable transportation. There, I remember in Philadelphia years and years and years ago, and maybe it was a national brand. There was a TV brand called Muntz, and and their claim to fame was, well, they sold below cost, but they made it up in volume. I'm not suggesting that there's an OEM out there
Yeah.
other than on the EV side of things that wants to sell below cost and is trying to make it up in volume, but couldn't they couldn't the volume be enough if they cater to the 20 to $30,000 price range? Couldn't that extra volume be enough to entice them to actually do it?
It's possible. Again, I'm not sitting in those boardrooms, and in advanced product planning department, at any manufacturer. Um, but I also see it the
Okay.
other way as well, from some potentially their shoes. Um, Everything's about capacity, right? So if you only have so many hours a day and so many workers to produce so many cars, right? You can't produce unlimited vehicles. You have a
Yes.
capacity, right? Um, there's an argument that can be made that says we should produce the ones that reward our shareholders
Yes.
the most, that help us get to our financial goals the most, right? And uh, again, though, I go back to behavior. At some point, the consumer is going to vote with their
Yes.
wallet. And that will force change quicker than you and I can finish this broadcast, because they don't ever want to be on the outside looking in and missing an opportunity. And that I do believe.
And that's something that I know Zach and I have discussed on the show. I mean, we even bought a website domain called "Don't Buy Don't Buy Don't Buy Cars" or whatever the hell it is. Don't buy a new because we just realized stop buying cars because until the vast majority of the population says, like from the movie Network, we're mad as hell and we're just
Yeah,
not going to pay this anymore. Yeah, until
yeah,
that
exactly.
happens, the manufacturers are going to keep doing what they're doing. And,
That's right.
you know, we reach, I don't know, 6 million people a month on our YouTube channels. I could scream that every day, but I'm still not reaching
Yeah.
enough Americans where it's going to make a difference. Um, and and I take flack sometimes when I say the problem is not a manufacturer's problem. The problem is a consumer problem because consumers keep paying it.
They're feeding it. No, I completely agree. And some have to. I've got to get to
Yes,
work. I've got to buy a car and all of that, right?
absolutely.
Uh, but you know, we as consumers, we have all the power, right? If you, it's hard. It's hard, but if you want to change something, we all react with dollars. So if why do dealers sell vehicles the way that they sell vehicles? Because consumers continue to buy them. Why do manufacturers continue to sell the vehicles that they make? Because consumers continue to buy them. It's not right or wrong. It's until somebody takes a stand and says, "I won't pay $50,000 for a $40,000 car, or I won't buy this." We're seeing it with electric
Hmm.
vehicles. Those are emerging. There's give or take in the car park of all the vehicles on the road out there, it's about 1% of them are EVs. But next year, EVs will account for about 8% of total sales. So we're starting to see that that's emerging. And Elon's playing all kinds of puppet games with his dropping his prices. And
Yeah.
that's, by the way, affecting how would you like to be Hertz right now, right? Who I think they bought like 100,000
Yes.
Teslas, and then he's dropped the price 2 or 3 or 4 times. That if I was running a Hertz, that would just give me a
Oh,
headache,
absolutely.
you know. And so, but that's changing. Um, so that's also
What
emerging.
do you think? Um, the growth of EVs is going to do to the value of ICE vehicles moving forward?
Um, I don't know. I have smarter people that could give you an opinion on that, or a factual opinion on that. I know that there's all kinds of goals and demands that by 2035, GM and others say they're not going to sell those. I think that's a tough goal to
Mm-hmm.
hit, by the way, especially if the price of EVs continues to stay inflated so much more than your ICE vehicles. Um, I think with anything though, so an educated but without having the data in front of me opinion, um, you could compare this to anything else, right? What's the value today of that tape cassette player that I used to hold in my room in the '80s compared to my iPhone, that I can record something on right now? It's not worth
Mm-hmm.
anything, right? So at some point, you're going to cross the threshold where EVs are the standard, and they begin to outweigh and outpopulate the ICE vehicles. And yes, they that will accelerate the depreciation of ICE vehicles when no one wants them. When it becomes cheaper or the same price to operate the ICE vehicle, yes, the legacy. The cheaper or the same price to operate the EV. The legacy ICE vehicles will begin to go the way of the dinosaur. There's a lot of things we can point in history that have taken the place of something else. I just can't tell you when that will
Do
happen.
you think the possibility exists because of the move towards EVs that some of the big legacy manufacturers could find themselves out of business at some point in the future because the the cost of getting it profitable will wipe them out before it becomes profitable?
I think that, and we're fortunate again. We sit at the intersection where we just work with all kinds of channels of players, including both these newfound
Mm-hmm.
startups. We work with VinFast and Rivian, and we're talking with Tesla, and we work with all these folks, but also the legacy ICE manufacturers. What I can tell you, without breaking confidentiality agreements, is that every ICE manufacturer that we work with, and we work with almost all of them, they all have roadmaps to EV. They either have them, they're already out on the street, or they're in the pipeline, or they're on the drawing board. And so they're going to figure out how to keep themselves relevant and how to keep uh, the consumer in their family. When you think of lifetime value of a
Mm-hmm.
customer, and this is why I go back to, I think that once the consumer votes and demands it, that behavior will change. Uh, a legacy ICE manufacturer wants to be ubiquitous. They want to be all things to everybody. They want to have an entry level car for the 22-year-old kid to buy. And then when they get married and have a baby, they want to have maybe a minivan. And they want to have the midlife crisis, and then they want to have the Chevy Tahoe, and they want to have the
Mm-hmm.
truck uh, for the construction worker. And so they want to figure out how to appeal to everyone, both in the types of vehicle as well as ICE versus electric. And so they're going to do everything they can to not be um, excluded from a consumer's research and purchase.
Final question for you. What's the difference between data and data?
An emphasis on the letter A. Yeah, the accent.
Got it. I've never been certain, so I needed somebody to, as I like to say, straighten my ass out. Um, Jared,
Depends. I'm sure you're in.
Jared, I could not thank you enough for participating on this, for being here today, um, for being a friend of Car Edge, and most importantly, for having listened to my son when he spoke to you, however many years ago it was. Um, I really enjoy the relationship that we have with you personally, and that we have with Black Book. It means the world to us.
Likewise, and I'm glad I took the call. So all those years ago. So,
Thank, yeah,
thanks for having me.
my
And
pleasure. Thank you again, Jared. Thank you so very much.